My name's Danny Vey. I'm the project manager on this project. I'm a planner at SANDAG, and super excited to be here tonight, and thank you for coming on this cold and rainy night. This is extreme for San Diego, as we know. So we're going to cover a little bit of project background. I saw a lot of new people that haven't been to one of these. If you haven't been to one, I'd strongly recommend you guys to get caught up to speed. We have all of our prior outreach events. We have recordings of them, and all the materials that we shared are all on our website, and you can go back and watch it. You can get caught back up to speed just like everybody else. So we don't want anybody to feel left out of the loop. So a little bit on the project background. So I like to show a video because this really illustrates the issue. So on board the train, as you're going over the Mar Bluffs, you can just look out the window and it's like, oh, there's the ocean down there. And you look down and the waves, you can't even see where the waves are crashing because they're crashing against the foot of the bluffs. I mean, just mere feet from the edge of the tracks of this rail corridor. This was a video captured in 2019 that shows the Mar Bluffs and a small bluff collapse. This type of event happens all the time. And we've been monitoring the bluffs with the Scripps Institution of Oceanography, and they've determined that that we're seeing up to 6 inches of bluff erosion per year over the last 20 years. That's really like the main reason why we need to get these tracks off these bluffs. But it's not the only reason. We also have a vision for this whole corridor. It's not just in Del Mar. This is across the whole corridor. So in 2021, SANDAG approved or adopted this transit leap vision as part of the 2021 regional plan. And with that vision, it talks about major improvements in this corridor. And it's, remind everybody, it's not just the coaster, it's also the Pacific Surfliner trains that go to LA, Santa Barbara, San Luis Obispo. And it's the freight trains that serve our Port of San Diego and our military institutions. We're talking about in 2050, 1 Pacific Surfliner train per hour per direction, 3 coaster trains per hour per direction all throughout the day, and a travel time of 33 minutes between Oceanside and downtown San Diego. Now, you can't drive that fast today, even in the middle of the night, but that's the transformational vision that we have for this corridor. This realignment project is an opportunity where we want to build this for the future, and this is one of those first projects. But this is a map showing all the other projects we have planned. So this isn't just Del Mar. We're doing all these improvements up and down the LOSSAN corridor. Today, we're talking about the realignment. This is the opportunity we have, and this is what we're focused on. So it's not just this corridor, and it's not just San Diego. There's also San Clemente. There's all the improvements in Orange County, all the improvements in LA. So this is all one connected corridor all throughout Southern California. And this bottleneck that exists on Del Mar is going to be addressed with these plans.
Danny, you mentioned San Clemente.
Yes.
Why is that?
That's a good question, Robin. So yeah, San Clemente is not on this map because that's outside of San Diego County. So SANDAG, our responsibility is San Diego County, but guess what? OCTA, they're behind us, the Orange County Transit Authority. They're the agency responsible for building and maintaining the rail corridor up there. But we're working with them. They are several years behind us. Right now, they're just kicking off their short-term and mid-term study to identify what stabilization efforts they can do in San Clemente to keep the tracks up. So SANDAG's been working on stabilization for 20 years. They're going to be doing the stabilization right now. We have several engineers in this room that are also working on that project, so there might be some folks that can talk about that. But ultimately, they do have plans for a long-term solution, but that's several years away up in Orange County. But we want to work with them. We're not competing with them. We're all in this together. This whole LOSSAN corridor, so improvements in Orange County benefit San Diego, and improvements in San Diego help Orange County and LA and vice versa. We're all connected. All right, so let's talk about the project goals. And this is really important in the context and the reasons why we're doing these projects and what these alignments are. So, of course, the obvious, relocate from the bluffs. I think we hit that very strong. So we need to identify somewhere else to put these tracks from this stretch that's right along the bluffs in Del Mar. Two, we want to minimize community impacts, not just in Del Mar or Del Mar Heights, Solana Beach. We want to preserve access to the fairgrounds. That's a regional community amenity. We want to improve travel times, like I said, and achieve that transit leap vision. And how do we do that? We straighten curves and we add double track. Right now it's single track, trains have to wait. So all of our plans include straightening curves, improving the speeds, and double tracking. And we also want to improve coastal access and safety. So there's an at-grade crossing where cars and trucks cross over the tracks right there next to Powerhouse Park. And there's people walking along the bluffs there. We want to make sure we can improve the coastal access, open those bluffs up for people to enjoy it, as well as improve the safety for the people that are using that facility, as well as for the train itself. And we also want to preserve wetlands. So we are also going through Los Penasquitos Lagoon, that's a single track section, and we also want to preserve the wetlands up in San Diego. Okay, so why a tunnel? Well, when you look at Del Mar, there's really no open path where we can realign this corridor. It's all developed, and what you also notice is that there's very steep terrain. We've got the San Diego Lagoon on the north side and the Los Penasquitos Lagoon on the south side. And if we want to achieve the goals of the project, straightening it out, minimizing impacts, the best way to do it is put it underground. And so that's why all the alignments we've looked at so far have all been tunnels. And I'll explain a little bit more why. So how are alignments selected? Let's get into that. So over the last 2 years, Robin mentioned, we've been working. We've completed the LOSSAN Rail Realignment Alternatives Analysis. So if you go to this website, you can see the culmination of all the work we've done. And click on that 2023, that's the most current information, and that has all of our information that we have on this project. So I recommend everybody going there and reading that to get up to speed on where we stand today. And I'm going to cover what's in that report, and you can actually talk to several of the folks at the tables afterward if you have questions about that report or want to see more details. We have people that have worked on that. So the alignments have definitions of different types of structures through the alignment. So we have bridges, I think that's pretty obvious, concrete bridges that span water or things like that. We have graded sections. So that's, in this picture, that would be like the berm that's going through, this is San Alejo Lagoon. Or it could be just on the ground in either graded areas that are cut. Pretty straightforward. Then we have these things called U-structures. And U-structure is basically a trench or a U-shaped structure with walls on both sides that are used for the transition from when we're at grade on the surface to when we start going underground. And those, and here's some examples of U-structures. If you've seen the trench up in Solana Beach, that's a U-structure. And then we have cut and cover. So these are tunnels, but these are tunnels that are shallow, that are connected, that are constructed from the surface and then backfilled over, so you can deck over them. So usually as you're transitioning from that U-structure to a tunnel, you start with a cut and cover section. But obviously with that environment, you have a lot of surface impacts. And then the last option, or the last of the infrastructure structures are a tunnel. And these are deep bore tunnels. These are tunnel boring machines that we're talking about. So there's no surface impacts, or there's no disruption to the surface when these tunnel machines are going. So they're constructed from one end and bored through the other. So we're hearing a lot of like, if this line's going to come through, we're destroying the city on the surface. But no, that's not correct. So we're going to be deep underground and 300 feet in some places in these tunnel boring machines. All right, and then we have things called portals. Essentially, these are just the openings where the tracks go from the surface to underground. We have two configurations that we're looking at. So we have single bore tunnels and twin bore tunnels. Single bore just means it's a larger tunnel, but with two tracks in it. Twin bore is smaller diameter tunnels, but two of them side by side with one track in them. And then it's also important to note that when we're designing these rail corridors and these alignments, we can't make these things up. We have to stick to the engineering best practices and standards. It's talked about in the report. You can check out Appendix J, and that highlights all the engineering basis of design requirements that all of these alignments must adhere to. So, which will make more sense as we jump into it a little bit more detail here. So the two biggest constraints when we're designing alignments are the horizontal and the vertical. So the horizontal means the left and right turning of the tracks. The horizontal is the up and down. Now, in order to achieve these higher speeds, this vision of 110 miles an hour, we need gradual curves. That's how you do it. You have to have smooth, gradual curves in order to achieve the higher speeds. And to get up to 110 miles an hour, the curve radius on that curve is almost 7,000 feet. So if you did a whole circle at 110 miles an hour, it would take almost 7,000 feet to make that full circle. Or actually, a radius of it. That's double that for the diameter. This is geometry lesson, and coming back to middle school here. The other point too on that one is with the passenger speed. So even if we just slow down to 100 miles an hour or 90 miles an hour, there's still gradual curves. So that it is a constraint that we have to deal with. And we hear that a lot of like, hey, can't you just slow down the train a little bit and choose a different alignment that maybe goes somewhere else? And the answer is, well, maybe we can look at it, but the fact is that even these, if we're trying to maintain these speeds, it's still a very gradual, smooth curve. Okay, the next thing is vertical. So this is the up and down, and this is the most significant constraint in order to design these rail corridors. So that 2% maximum slope, that is really the driving factor of where we can site these things. It's the most difficult thing for engineers to figure out where these portals go is because of this 2% slope. So we can use topography to our advantage. We'll talk about that. And then there's clearances that we'll get into more detail as well. But that 2%, that's a key constraint. So how do we visualize a 2% slope? We talked about, like, this is it's very gradual. So if let's just have a hypothetical. It's football season. Our Aztecs aren't having the best year, but let's say we're returning a kickoff. We got a football player on the goal line, and as he runs up to the 50-yard line, he's 3 feet higher on a 2% slope. All the way at the end of that football field, as he's scoring a touchdown, only 6 feet higher. So from one end to the other, that's the maximum slope of a rail corridor. And so essentially, 2% slopes, very gradual, and changing elevations, going from above ground to below ground, requires a great distance. So those are the two important things. So let's illustrate that with some illustrative examples. So on flat topography, if we were just on a football field, which doesn't exist here in San Diego, and we got lots of hills, to go down on a 2% slope to get underground in deep enough where we can start a bored tunnel section, it's going to require 3,600 feet of U structure. So this is, remember that picture of the trench. So that's how long it is to get down and into a tunnel. Now, if we looked at a location that has steeper topography, we can use that hillside to get deep quicker and shrink the footprint of that U structure. So that transition for when we're graded to underground, we can shrink that down to 2,000 feet in this hypothetical example here. Now, we also heard a lot about a portal in the fairgrounds. This is what we hear a lot, like just put it in the fairgrounds. And I just want to illustrate some of the challenges with that. And I think it's difficult to see when you're looking just on a map. You've got to look at it from the side view. So in this instance, I'm gonna replay it again. Let's see if it'll work. So if we're coming off Solana Beach, even though it's in a trench, it's much higher than where it is in San Dieguito Lagoon. In order to get down underneath the lagoon, we've got to be deep enough below the surface of the river. We'd have a large cut and cover section and then a large U structure. And look at that, over almost 7,000 feet to get back up to grade if we're dropping that deep. So that is a challenge. It's just a much bigger structure if we're going against topography on a downhill. Okay, so let's look at vertical clearances. This is another key factor. So I talked briefly about twin bore and single bore, but in the context of these alignments, twin bore, they have a wider footprint, but they can be shallower, so that vertical transition doesn't have to be as deep before we can start the bored tunnel section. When you have a single bore, the footprint's a little narrower, but we have to be much deeper. And so there's trade-offs with each of these, and so we're looking at that. So that's another constraint. Another thing with grade separation, so remember the goal of safety. We will not have any new at-grade crossings. There's so when we're crossing roadways, we need to make sure that we have the appropriate vertical clearances for roads to go either under or over. And you got to think about the ramping up and down of the roadways to get over or under the rail corridor. And that has a footprint of itself too. Okay. So the alternatives analysis, they have maps like this. This talks about the different types of structures. So this is a Camino del Mar. I'm going to go through all of these, and it shows where we have a graded section. So this one ties in right at the SANDAG Lagoon. So we have a double track project with a platform at the fairgrounds. This particular alignment ties into the south abutment of that bridge. Let's see if I can use the pointer right there. And so we're on graded section. We go down into a U structure and go under Jimmy Durante and into a deep bored tunnel, roughly, but not directly under Camino del Mar. And then we pop out under Carmel Valley Road and have bridge structures. And those yellow lines are the bridge structures through Los Penasquitos Lagoon. And that is where the existing rail corridor is. And there's bridges on there, but those are single track bridges, and they're not as wide as the ones we're proposing here. So our goal is to have no net fill in the lagoon. So if we're taking a bridge, or if we're adding longer bridges instead of wider berms when we're in lagoons to minimize, and that goal of is to preserving wetlands. Okay. So we'll go through some of these a little more quickly, and we have a map up here too. So if you want to look afterward, you can come talk to me and we can go through each of these. But we have Crest Canyon and above with essentially the same alignment where we go under Jimmy Durante, but this one would pop out over Carmel Valley Road near the 556 interchange. The Crest Canyon higher speed. On the northern end, it's very similar where we go under Jimmy Durante, we pop out near Portofino, and we go over Carmel Valley Road and a bridge and berm across Los Penasquitos Lagoon. We have Crest Canyon below. So this one starts in the same spot. We go under Jimmy Durante, we tie into that new bridge, and we go, actually this one stays in the tunnel under Carmel Valley Road and pops out at a tunnel location that's near the knoll. There's a knoll near the pump station there out by I-5. And then the I-5 alignment. So this was an alignment that we hear a lot about. I'm not sure if it's the same alignment that I think people have in their mind, but this is the one that works for us. I shouldn't say that. This is the one that we've looked at, and we're looking at other ones as well. But you can see here we tie into, this one starts north of the river. So it ties in at the south end of the new platform that's going to be constructed there at the fairgrounds, and then go in a bridge structure over Jimmy Durante, and then along as a bridge, a viaduct, along the south edge of the Sandaguito Lagoon, and then into a U structure, right near Crest Canyon, and then into a tunnel that goes under I-5, and then we curve back out to Portofino. I hear a lot about this one, about why don't we just go straight through under the I-5? Well, at the interchange there with 556, those are large bridge structures with deep foundations. So it provides, there's constraints with how we can put the tunnel through there. So we need to avoid all those deep column, those deep foundations at the interchange in order to make this work. So that's one reason why it curves away. So you'll see this map. This is our alternatives analysis. So we started with those 5 alignments, and we heard some initial feedback. We heard, why can't you put the portals somewhere else? Can you look at different locations? And so that's what we did. We started looking at several of these locations. So we have the Jimmy Durante location there. These 2 were identified previously. We looked at a portal location in the Del Mar Fairgrounds and how that would work. That's all in the report. We have one that's that's basically into the hillside, right above the roundabout there on Jimmy Durante. We also looked at other locations that were, this one's actually very similar to the Jimmy Durante one, but instead of going straight under Jimmy Durante and into the hillside, it kind of curves to the west a little bit. And that one keeps the portal all within the public right-of-way under the roadways, under Jimmy Durante and Camino del Mar. And then goes into a deep bore tunnel. And then the I-5 knoll. This is another portal that has seen a lot of promise as well, because that keeps the portal away from homes in this neighborhood here, and reduces the amount of footprint that's in the lagoon. But there's different challenges with that one, with larger U structures within the lagoon. Other considerations. So I mean, the horizontal and vertical are the big ones, and but there's other issues. We've got constructability. So we have to maintain rail operations when we construct this thing. So the duration of the construction, we have a 7-year construction duration now. It's a long time, but if it's more complex to build, it's going to take much longer than that. Rail operations, maintaining rail service. So how do we do that? And traffic impacts. If we're disrupting roadways, we need to be able to design for that. Construction staging areas. So if we're putting portals where we're launching the tunnel boring machines, we need to have space where we can support that operation. And so we need to identify where those laydown areas are. Sea level rise is also a big constraint. The floodplain, of course, right? That's all, the whole lagoon area in the fairgrounds is obviously in a floodplain. So we need to make sure that this corridor is resilient to flooding. We want to make sure we have access to the fairgrounds with the platform. And then there's also maintenance and operations issues. We need to build this. NCTD is going to own and operate it, so we need to make sure that we build something that they can do that with. And then there's also, it's not just the public and the engineers, there's also the regulatory agencies that have an input on this project. And then NCTD and BNSF. NCTD is going to own and operate this. BNSF has the right to operate trains on this. And I have a new slide here on BNSF. We get a lot of questions about BNSF and like, wow, they're a constraint. That 2% grade, that is because we run freight trains on this corridor. So yes, this corridor is publicly owned. It was purchased in the 1990s from the Santa Fe Railroad, which is now BNSF. But as part of that purchase agreement, there's a shared use agreement, 1992, up there. And it has these requirements. Essentially, we can't do things that are going to hinder the rail operations of BNSF. That is really restrictive to what we can do. So we can't just say, no freight trains on here. This is a freight corridor, and there will always be freight trains on this corridor. All right, so let's move on to the process and what we're doing with the feedback that we're getting. So through November, we're collecting all these new ideas. So we shared with you some of the lines we've drawn on the map. You see that's the spaghetti map here with all the purple lines on it. We're collecting more lines. So we're gonna have exercise following this where you guys can actually draw your own lines and help us identify what we've missed or what we need to look at. And then throughout the winter, our engineering team will be looking at and evaluating all the different alignments. And then in spring of 2024, that's when we will begin the scoping process and identify that range of alternatives that will be carried forward and studied in further detail. And then from spring of 2024, we have that range of alternatives. We're going to do a whole bunch of work. And that's going to culminate in the 2025 draft environmental document. And then a final decision will be made in 2026. All right, and then overall project, so that gets us to 2026 on how we get there. So picking up there, so in 2026, once we figure out what alignment we do, that's when the decision's been made. Then we can design it all the way to 100%, and it'll take us 2 years to do that, and we can start construction pending we find some construction funding in 2028, and I mentioned 7-year construction time frame to get us open to public in 2035. Outreach events, we have, this is our second alignment workshop. We also have a community field office, so we'll be at the Del Mar Town Hall every Tuesday through, I think, mid-December at least. And then we also have a virtual outreach option as well, where you can sign up and schedule a meeting with some of the project team members if you have lots of questions that you want answered. And we can, if you give us the questions in advance, we can have the right people on that meeting to help answer those questions. And my last slide before I hand it back, I just wanted to reiterate some of these key takeaways as we advance into the alignment workshop. So we're looking for feedback on those alignments that we've already looked at. So there's packets at these tables here. So if you have comments on, hey, I like this alignment, but just do something different, you can write that on those alignments. If you want to draw lines on the map, you can do that too. And I just recommend that keep in mind that topography and the slope. So keep topography in mind of when those portals or where those portals can go. We have engineers at each of the tables to help you identify where those potential locations could go. That 2% slope is very critical, and it's the most challenging aspect of it. And then if we're crossing roadways or going over or under roadways, we need to make sure we have the proper clearances for that. Just another tip is to identify those portals first. Those are the most constrained areas, and then you can connect the dots once you've identified where those portals can go.